Yeah, I mean, I generally get really worked up quite a bit about stories about the criminal justice system, open justice, the poor sentencing of criminals in the UK. When you look at the records of some of the worst criminals in this country and their sentences are so lenient, absolutely, sickens me. I mean, and as an industry, we should be really doing more to campaign about the fact that women and children in our communities aren't safe to walk the streets. I mean, it's those sort of stories, the stories that we're going to be covering, in the true crime. I mean, the recent, sentencing of, Wayne Cousins and, now David Carrick, and this week, another Met Police Chief Inspector, Richard Watkinson, facing charges for child abuse images. I mean, that's 3 senior Met police officers. It's just incredible. I mean, that's the sort of thing that makes my blood boil. And the fact is that that trust in the community, the communities that we're serving, we want the people who live in our communities to feel safe. And if they can't even feel safe from the police, who can they feel safe by? Well, those are the sorts of things that make my blood boil.
Absolutely. I mean, police officers, obviously, being a former police officer, you've got Cousins, you've got Carrick, and you've got Watkins. These are 3 big cases that have come to attention in the last 3-4 days. And I think one of the massive problems is that it then tars everybody with the same brush. I had a police officer that messaged me yesterday, and their plea was, please, can we get some messages? Can we let the public know we're not all like that? It is the minority. And one of the criticisms that they're applying currently is they don't feel supported by the senior officers. The senior officers come out and talk and say, look, we're shocked by this, it's appalling. But they don't go and tell them and say, do you know what, rank and file officers up and down, not just in the Metropolitan Police, but up and down the country, are doing a brilliant job. And they are doing a brilliant job. It's the minority that affect it for everybody else. And of course, they're shocking. I mean, I think one of the things about society and life is that we know about cases because they're so shocking and because they don't happen every single day. If they happened every single day, there'd be a normality. We'd go, well, it happens every day, so what? No, we know about it. We talk about it because they are so horrific. I mean, the reality of having a chief inspector who at home has a closet which was full of child abuse material, stories, other related child material and clothing, serving and in a position of authority to that degree is truly shocking. And it does ask the question, and I think it's a question that we as a society have to address, but certainly the police has to address, is what type of people are now getting into the police service? Yeah. In my day, as a police officer, when you applied to become a police officer, you had the local sergeant come and visit you at home. You go through a real scrutiny in terms of recruitment. That is not happening. And I'll tell you why it's not happening. Because there are currently, or there were 30,000 police officers needed to be recruited. And in order to get that number up, they had to drop some of the requirements of recruitment because, of course, not everybody would fit that. They wouldn't be able to get 30,000. And that results in some of those people who should not be in the police force, in the force.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, 100%. And I saw a report yesterday to say that they're going to be doing criminal record checks on all of the existing police force. Why wasn't that done when they started? I mean, it's absolutely shocking to think that these people who are meant to be protecting us are actually some of the worst criminals among them. And it's just absolutely stunning. I really, it really needs, to be, completely redone from start to finish, the police force, because that's the only way there's going to be any trust. There needs to be some serious fundamental changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, how can Carrick between 2020 and 2021 be investigated 9 times for allegations of a rape and still be in a job? He was investigated in 2021 for an allegation of rape, but he was put on light duties. What? Suspend the man, and whilst that suspension goes on, investigate. And when the allegation was dropped, he was allowed to return back to duties. But some of the most sensitive duties, he held a gun. He was responsible for the policing of the Prime Minister. How is that possible? How is it possible that a person who's been suspended, how is it possible that a person who's been investigated for rape is carrying a gun and is on duty? I mean, I find that absolutely incredible, don't you?
I do. I mean, it's jaw-dropping stuff. It really is. I mean, and the fact that, you know, Wayne Couzens' nickname was the rapist, you know, and and David Carrick's nickname was the bastard, you know, and it's kind of like, well, if that was their nickname, surely that should have been some red flags right away, you know, and you know, this is the thing about it, is that all of these things could have been stopped, you know, before they happened. The worst possible crimes could have been stopped if the police had done their job properly with these guys that have now, you know, been one of the worst criminals in the country and in our history for the type of crimes that they've now been responsible for.
And it's quite incredible that an individual can be arrested for an allegation, yet the police not check out their job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just absolutely smacks of a complete, you know, cover up and keep it all hushed up. And you know, any policeman that's got any criminal record or criminal tendency should simply not be in the job. It's as simple as that.
And do you know, I find that really interesting, because that's my view. My view is, if you have a criminal record, with the exception of perhaps something as a very young person that you did, which was a minor, you know, criminal damage or something, which you can explain, you know, it was a moment of time and it was a long time ago. But anybody who has any substantial offences, I am astonished that they are allowed to be a police officer. And I'm sorry, you know, if I held a position of politician, I would simply say, if you have a conviction of dishonesty, theft, you know, sexual offence, you cannot be a police officer. I don't see how you can uphold the law when you've broken the law.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.